my honor today to introduce our speaker, Dr. Chasity Bailey-Fakhoury, for our winter installment of HerStory. So Chasity is a sociologist of education whose primary research examines the relationship between gendered racial socialization, racial gender identity development, and academic achievement, particularly as they relate to African American girls. She also facilitates workshops and trainings on inclusive teaching practices, equity leadership, culturally relevant pedagogies, stereotype threat, and professional identity development. Her research has been published in several journals such as the Michigan Family Review, the Dubois Review, Social Science Research on Race, and the Urban Review. As a King Chavez Parks Future Faculty Fellow, she received her PhD in sociology from Wayne State University, as well as her Master's of Education in Secondary Social Studies Education, and earned her AB in sociology from the University of Michigan. Before joining CHECI at Grand Valley State University in 2013, Chasity taught for 15 years in the Detroit Public Schools. In 2015, she was recognized with the Outstanding Faculty Mentor Award by the GVSU Graduate Student Association, was the 2018 recipient of the Birch, Jacobs, and Moore Diversity Teaching Excellence Award from the GVSU Pew Faculty Teaching and Learning Center, and in 2023 was honored to receive the Women's Commission Community Impact Award. Chasity is rooted in education as a practice of freedom and promulgates that ethos as a freedom dreamer and creator, seeking to grow communities and deepen connections one place at a time.
Thank you. Cool. Thanks. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Good. I am so honored, first of all, to have the invitation to be able to share my story here. So thank you to the Women's Commission. I am honored to see your faces sitting there, your beautiful faces, folks who I have worked very closely with across the university, people who are in my circle. And so this is just an absolute honor to be here. So I'm not gonna stay around this, right? So are we good if I kind of move it around? Because it feels, I'm a little stifled back here, sorry, right? So, to think about my story, right? You have to understand my roots. You have to understand where I'm rooted to get to where I am at this present moment on February 27th, 2024, right? I was born in a little town called Wynne, Arkansas. Only about 7,000 people in the town, okay? I was 5 years old when we came to Detroit, Michigan from Wynne, Arkansas. So my mom and my dad lived down the street from each other, like 4 houses away. So I had both sets of grandparents whenever we would, come back from Detroit to Arkansas. This is very formative for me. This is a very important piece of who I am standing before you today, was that experience in Arkansas. So something else that you should know, right, about roots and being rooted, is that for me, while my mother and my father, a couple houses down the road, right, I was born to an 18-year-old, okay? My mother was 18 when she had me. She was the oldest girl, and there was a lot that ended up being on her shoulders for being the oldest girl and having a baby at 18. So the first 5 years of my life, that woman, Geraldine, that you see to the left is my grandmother, my mom's mom. So she raised me for the first 5 years of my life before we came to Detroit, Michigan. My mother, Aquanetta, you see the resemblances. I look at these high school graduation photos, and I was just like a little tripped out to see my grandmother with her the little white, apron or whatever they call it, the collar that she had to wear. My mother with this black boa. It actually is white, black. I know it's a black and white photo, but it is a black boa that they had the young women wear at Wynn High School. And then myself, I just picked that dress. I didn't really know, what my grandmom and my mom wore as they graduated high school, but that's my senior high school picture with this dress with this like white cape and black, right? So it is very important as I go along. The lessons that my grandmother taught me, that my mother taught me, and that I carry with me, and that you all have been the beneficiaries of in the relationships that I have had with you and the work that I've done at the institution. So to tell my story, I gotta start there, right, with those women. So there were some very formative things that happened for me, right, the essence of who I am. So in Arkansas, even though we left Arkansas in 1979 and came to Detroit, Michigan, I would go back to Arkansas every single summer and spend the summer. There's a lot in that, so as I move, you'll learn that as well. I came through Detroit Public Schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. I am a proud graduate of the Detroit Public School system, and I will tell everybody that. That's right, DL back there. Mike, your sister was in my graduating class. Mike's sister went to Renaissance, right? And then I went on to the University of Michigan. So these are three huge things that help along this journey. So I told you about the first 5 years of my life. There you see my grandmother, Geraldine, sitting to the left. And so the thing, if anybody has spent some time with me, and you might have remarked, right, coffee. So when I drink coffee, I put I say that I like a little coffee with my cream and sugars, okay? That's how I take it. I've had people come up to me at like an Einstein's. One gentleman said to me, "You need to watch that sugar. That's a lot of sugar you putting in that coffee." And I'm like, just go ahead, don't worry about me. I got that from Geraldine Brown Wilson. So what I would do is, as a kid, my grandmother would sit in that chair and she would watch her soaps. The Young and the Restless, and General Hospital, and I would sit there and watch the soaps with her. She would do the laundry or other kinds of things, and she would make her a little coffee, and she'd give me a little coffee. And so I developed this like of sweet, creamy coffee as a result of that, right? And then you see, again, my mother and myself and my brother Brandon, who was in her arms at that particular time. So there was a lot that happened to me in Arkansas. First of all, in Arkansas, it was still in Wynn, a segregated town, right? And so literally the black folks lived on one side of the railroad tracks and the white folks lived on the other side of the railroad track. My grandmother would clean the homes of different white folks in Wynn, and sometimes I would go with her. And as she did that, and I would help her out, and I would see in the stores, that people, white people in particular, they would talk with her to her with a lot of respect. It was Miss Geraldine. That was very interesting, right, as a little kid, because I lived on the black side. You didn't see white people. They didn't come over there, right? We would go on to the white side of the city, and that is where I would interact. And so it was always interesting, that dynamic. It was Miss Geraldine. And the other thing that being in Arkansas did for me is exploring the world, or I should say worlds. The natural world, being outside, playing in the creek, fishing, seeing my grandfather come back to the house, and him having, I didn't eat it because I got to see what he did when he brought the rabbits back home. But I could tell you if I had to, there are things that I know how to do that I could survive should the electricity go out, should I need to go and fish, should I need to go milk a cow, I have learned those things, and that is by virtue of going back to Wynne, Arkansas every summer for the first 18 years of my life. Sadly, my grandmother passed when I was a junior in high school. She had always wanted to see me graduate, and she didn't get that opportunity to do that. And after that, it just wasn't the same for me going back, right? So anyway, so Marcus Garvey, right? A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. And I do believe that. Knowing my family's history, knowing our history as folks living in the US is really important. So part of who I am and who you have come to experience, the unconditional love I had from my grandmother, showing me how to love. My mom showed me how to love, what love is like, unconditional. I walk through the world like that. Food for the soul, learning how to cook by my grandmother's side. I enjoy food, some of y'all know. We go to dinner, or I talk about Italian cuisine and how I like to cook, right? These are things that I get from my grandmother and my mother. And then, like I said, exploring the worlds around me, the natural world, feeling comfortable in that, and all these different social worlds that I was introduced into, this all-Black village, right, that put their arms around me and raised me, being able to see what it was like on the other side of the track, right? Those are all things that I carry with me. So, we get here. And you get to see in the upper left-hand corner is a picture of my elementary school in Detroit, Bow Elementary. In the upper right-hand corner is a picture of my old middle school, Coffee Middle School. And that is a picture from when it was shuttered, and there were a lot of schools that ended up being closed in Detroit as Detroit Public Schools was going through bankruptcy. And so that is my old school there. And then in the bottom left-hand corner is my high school. It doesn't look like that anymore. This was the old building. Mike, this was the, well, were you in the new building? No. Oh, you were in the, that's right. DL was in the old building. Right, so you know this building. So it was founded in 1978, right? I graduated from Renaissance High School in 1992. And so that was the building. Then we got this brand new state-of-the-art building. In like 2005, okay. I don't have a picture of that building. I mean, it's nice and everything, but this is the place. And then in the lower right-hand side, you see some pictures of teachers, some of my former teachers. Now, this picture, I wasn't hanging with them as a student. So I was very fortunate in 2003 that I was able to return to my high school to teach. And I got to teach with the people who taught me. Now, some of them I was like, Now, I knew when I was taking your physics class that it wasn't all right. And now I know for real, right? But these are people who poured into me. These are people who just did everything that they could, right, to help me blossom and find who I was and equip me with what I needed to move through the world. And that came through Detroit Public Schools. So when I think about Detroit Public Schools, from elementary to high school, my brilliance was axiomatic. It was unquestioned. And not just my brilliance, the brilliance of my peers. I had the benefit of having teachers who looked like me. I could see. I could be a math teacher if I wanted to. I could be a science teacher if I wanted to. The person who was teaching me multiplication, who taught me how to read, my third grade teacher, Miss Angela Jones. She lit a fire in me for reading. the love of language. I would go home and I would go in the dictionary and I would look up words because I wanted to come back to school and I wanted to impress Miss Jones with some new word that I learned. And she would praise me for that. I loved reading aloud in class, right? And I had that going through elementary school, middle school, the Optimist Club. I was in Future Homemakers of America for 3 years in middle school. Home ec was great. I learned a lot of valuable skills, right? That was a part of the curriculum at the time, 6th through 8th grade in Detroit public schools. Everyone took home ec, everyone took shop, woodworking, I had to go to shop, right? All of these were a part of the curriculum there. And I had in high school my 9th grade English teacher who I developed a love of Shakespeare. He would bring in, you might not know, he would bring in these old records from when plays were being recorded at the Globe Theatre in London. We had these records, and we would sit with, whether it was King Lear or Hamlet, and we would listen, and we would read along. And I developed a love, and the way he would talk about it and bring it to make it relevant for me, right? So this was my experience. Folks who helped to shape who I am today, who helped me to, again, develop my voice and my perspective that I bring right now in 2024 to Grand Valley State University. University of Michigan, I am a proud recipient of the Wade H. McCree Incentive Scholarship, right? This was a scholarship that allowed for me to go to the University of Michigan and have my tuition paid. Didn't pay for room and board and those stuff, but my tuition got paid, okay? So I had some loans coming out still, right? But we did it. And at the University of Michigan, there is so much that I'm just gonna stay to the slide because there are lots of things that I could talk about, right? One of the most pivotal things for me at the University of Michigan was that I got to study abroad to Italy. I got to spend a semester in Italy learning Italiano, going and soaking in the Renaissance art, going all around Florence. Florence is like a second home to me. My husband and I have gone back to Florence like about 4 or 5 times, right? We love Italy. He better have loved Italy because if he hadn't, it would have been a problem, okay? So here I am in Rome at the Colosseum, standing on some of the ruins. You can't do that no more. That was 1996, okay, but you can't do that anymore. I had pictures taken of me because I was studying to be a social studies teacher. So I knew I was gonna teach world history. Dang, y'all gonna see me in ruins from the Roman civilization, your teacher. And I took pictures to bring back to my students and make into transparencies, because that's all we had, transparencies, right? I put that little plastic thing on there, and my students, as we were talking about Roman civilization, could see me as I'm talking about these things. They're seeing me there. So if I can do that back at Renaissance High School, Northern High School in Detroit, where I taught, Joy Middle School, as I taught social studies, if you can see me there, that's something that is accessible to you. Talk to me about it, and I'll help you figure out how you can get your picture, right? So that it was an important experience for me to be able to bring back to my students, right? So from the University of Michigan, I grew my sociology. My major, as Trista said, I have my undergrad in biology from University of Michigan, and I got my teaching certificate. So I didn't come through the School of Education at U of M. At this time, University of Michigan, and it may still be the same, I went through Literature, Science, and Arts, LS&A, and then got my certificate at the same time. I took my education courses, but I didn't have to come into, right? You could continue in LS&A or whatever, or you could get your Bachelor's of Science, in, a BA or BS in education. And I chose to get my BA in LS&A because I love sociology so much. And all I wanted to do was teach social sciences, right? So I thought that was the way for me. So I've always loved sociology from the time I was introduced to it in high school, even beyond. Before I even knew what it was, I was in love with it. Because there was something about seeing the world and trying to understand what was going on. I was always so curious about people and relationships, right? And dialect and different cultural practices. And it was always something that was there for me. And sociology was just like, oh, that's what it's called, right? This thing that helps me to understand the world, that unlocks my understanding, has a name. And so I love it. It is a huge part, again, of who I am. Advocacy and activism is a part of University of Michigan, coming out of, there were 3 Black action movements at the University of Michigan, one in the 60s, one in the 70s, and one in the late 80s. So by the time I got there in '92, there were still folks who were a part of the Black action movement on campus, still trying to, make the university a place of being responsive to the needs of its Black students. And so I got involved in that, right? This is my university, right? And that became a part of who I was through that particular experience. And just the Italy experience helped to broaden my horizon. Being in Italy opened up the world to me. I got to see what it was like to be Black someplace outside of the US, and it was different. It was different, the interactions and the way that people interacted with me. And I loved it. And I got to go to France there, and then I got to go to Spain, I got to go to Switzerland. I got to travel around Europe, backpack 2 weeks with a girlfriend of mine who was doing study abroad in Madrid, Spain. And so we met up, I went to her, we went to Madrid and Barcelona, then we came to Italy, and I took her around Cinque Terre and Firenze and Roma, and then we went to France and went to Nice. Oh, that was beautiful. And Monte Carlo, we got to go to the casino. That was phenomenal. We got dressed up and everything. And then we took the train to Switzerland. And so I was able to experience that after the study abroad, right? So that's important. The way that I see myself, the way that I want to know more about people and culture, and what it's like to be in other parts of the world, just having that humility is a part of my experience, again, for something that I had from the University of Michigan. So, getting to education as the practice of freedom. Bell Hooks, Teaching to Transgress, a book that changed my life. How I want to interact with my students in Detroit Public Schools, and what I've carried here to Grand Valley as I interact with our students, undergraduate and graduate. So in this education as the practice of freedom, there are other things that are important to this particular ethos, right? So Lifting as We Climb, this is from Mary Church Terrell, who was one of the founders of the National Association of Colored Women. And that is what you do. That is coming from a Black womanist standpoint, it is, as you climb, you lift. There are others who are coming behind you, and as you're climbing and making your way, you should also be lifting others. That is something that speaks to me in my spirit and the way in which I was reared and raised. That is not everybody's experience. That is Chastity's experience, and that is Chastity's philosophy. And that is the way that I move through spaces, right? So when people say, well, you're doing this and you're doing that, and you're doing that. And I'm like, right? Because I feel as though that, in particular when it comes to students, that it's important for me to be visible. It's important for me to be visible. It doesn't take anything off of me to show my face and just say, I see you and I'm here, right? And so that is important. And this theory around womanism, which is comes out of the work of Alice Walker that you see there. And I'll just, so that you have an understanding of where I'm coming from, right? Womanism is an expression of Black women's consciousness or Black women's standpoint. Essentially, womanism asserts that Black women exist within an intersectional history of racial and gender oppressions, that individual empowerment combined with collective action is key to lasting social transformation, and that Black women are concerned with the liberation of all peoples, but in particular, that of Black folks, right? And from that little girl in Arkansas, coming through Detroit Public Schools with the teachers that I had and the mentors that I had, to my experiences at the University of Michigan, to who I am today, this is what I live. This is the work that I do, right? I say in spaces that I want to be free. I want to be liberated. I don't want to worry about this stuff. I want to come into a space and be accepted for who I am, not try to convince you of my worth and I should be at this table, right? None of us should have to do that. We all should be free to be who we are. We should be free from societal constraints. We should be free to be the creative, innovative human beings that we are. And that's what I'm working for. To accept me in all my glory, to accept me in all my, some days it's not so glorious. And not to count that against me, not to hold that against me, because I'm human. And so this is what I do and why I do. Right? So you get to see some pictures of my students back from Renaissance High School. I wish I could have, had I known. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So the middle, I taught AP psychology at Detroit Renaissance High School. That was important for me to help students to be able to come to college with some college credit. And 70% at least of my students over the 10 years that I was there earned a 3 or better on the AP Psych, right? That was huge. So one day, it was my birthday. So they so nosy, kids, they just nosy. And so somebody found out it was my birthday. I don't know how. I probably had said something about February 25th, whatever. But just kind of off the cuff. And I come in and these children have cake, they have balloons and stuff, and they put this little party together in my classroom for me. And I cherish that. I cherish that so much. And all of those folks have gone on to do some phenomenal things. It's just been a blessing to be able to work with children, to be able to partner with children, to be able to take as axiomatic their brilliance. Some examples of some of the other students, graduation pictures and thank you cards and things of that nature. And one that I really will point to, first of all, Shayla in the middle who went to Spelman College, she and I still communicate today. She is one that I keep in contact with. But Gregory Davis, to the right-hand side, that was his little thank you note to me, as he was my AP Psych student. He was in my class for 2 years. Now, he took intro psych for the first semester, psych/soc, right? And then he did AP psychology it was a full year. This child he didn't need me. He could have got a Princeton Review psychology book for the AP test, read it cover to cover, and would have got a 5 anyway. That's the kind of kid he was. So I've kept in contact with him over the years, and he talks about thank you for psychology, and then he goes on to Harvard. He goes on to major in African and African American studies, psychology, and then African American studies, and now he is at Harvard in the dean's office there, right? And he teaches an intro psych class. This is some of the proudest moments in my life. And that's kind of the only drag about being here at a university. Nobody gonna come back to you after 4, 5, 6 years and talk about, remember when you taught me? That doesn't happen, right? You get your college degree and you out. You come back, do your alumni events or whatever, and that's pretty much it. So that's what I miss about PK-12. When I first got here, there were students from Renaissance High School who attended here. And I was in Pew Campus, down at the Starbucks in the DeVos Center, when we had a Starbucks in the DeVos Center, before they moved it. And I was just walking around, and a couple of students ran up to me. I was like, Ms. Fakhoury, what are you doing here? And that was 2014. And I had gotten here August of 2013. And I said, I'm here now. I'm in the College of Education and I'm teaching it. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And that was great. That was the last of my little legacy, right? I have touched no other high school, Detroit Public Schools lives since then. But that was awesome as well. So I'm gonna kind of fast forward through this, but just for you to kind of, again, know who I am, know my story, some of the formative things. That was my dissertation committee. Their pictures are there. KCP fellowship. I was a KCP Future Faculty Fellow and also a Thomas Rumble Fellow from Wayne State University. So I was very fortunate to be able to have some financial support to help me through my graduate studies. It was really nice the last couple of years as I was finishing up my PhD. Now up until that point, I had been working full time, right? My master's, it took me 6 years, took me 7 years to finish my PhD. I tell people all the time, I was working full time. My students, would see me in the classroom sometimes with my books and things from Wayne State, and they're asking about what I was doing and wanting to know about my PhD and stuff. And so the first few years, that was all funded, of course, by me. But the last 2 years of my PhD, 3 years with KCP actually, I did have some support for that. And so that was a great experience. And then I don't know if they do this with Howard University anymore, but this was an awesome experience. A weekend, I was pregnant with my second child at that time, but I was not gonna miss going to Howard University and experiencing this Alliance for Graduate Education program and all of the supports for helping folks get through your PhD into the professorate, right? If that's what you wanted. And that's what I wanted, and I knew that I wanted that. At Wayne State, I had a lot of great experiences, again, being in Detroit and everything. I got to, with some of the work I was doing at Wayne State, my mother is a poet, and I fell in love with Nikki Giovanni because my mother loved Nikki Giovanni. And so Nikki Giovanni was coming to Wayne State University to speak specifically, to do a little workshop with KCP Future Faculty Fellows, and I got to MC, I got to introduce her, and I got to have my mama meet Nikki Giovanni, her hero. right? And so that was so awesome for me. And then that picture you see in the upper right hand, so when I was getting my degree, my PhD, one of my students from Renaissance was graduating from Wayne State, and she sought me out in the crowd, and we were able to take a picture. She was getting her undergrad, and here I was done with my PhD, and she was like, "You finally finished, Mr. Corey." I'm like, "Yes, I did," right? Which brings me to Grand Valley State University and my time here. Again, if you have had any time in a room with me, I think maybe you can see, right, some of the reason, the impetus, the foundation for the things that I do and the ways in which I move through this particular space, right? So these are some of the great things. It's great to be associate professor here. It is great to support my colleagues in educational foundations as a program coordinator. It was absolutely great to be one of the inaugural presidential fellows in the Office of the President. And it has also been a great opportunity to be in the GV Next Ed Collab, working with K-12 Connect, the online tutoring program, and serving as the Director of Engagement for Educational and Community Innovation in that space. And thinking about, in the classroom, building community, being is extremely important. Relationships with my students is extremely important. And so thinking about teaching to transgress, I want to know who they are, and in turn, they have to know who I am, right? Where am I coming from? I want to know where they're coming from. What are they bringing with them? And so I share with them this, right? In all of my classes, students do a intellectual autobiography, right? And so basically I mimic kind of the things that they do in the presentation of sharing with us their intellectual autobiographies. And so I give them a little oversight as to who I am and what I've come through. And so you see some of that there for you that I would share with them. If I had to encapsulate the way that I see myself at the institution and how I see myself as a leader, leading from where I sit, right? Whatever space that may be in, that is servant leadership. And that is how I would encapsulate how I see myself at the institution and the places that I have been able to be fortunate to be a part of. There are a lot of different characteristics of a servant leader, but these are three that really jump out, right? So you can talk about leading with putting people first. I think that kind of is self-explanatory in that piece. But you can also talk about characteristics such as a person of character being a skilled communicator and leading with moral authority in addition to these other three. But I think these kind of really resonate for me when I think about who I am and the work I do at the institution. I'm big on collaboration. We're talking about making big moves. We're talking about big changes, right? We're talking about birthing things that we want to have a long life, right? And one person cannot do that. It takes collaboration to make that happen. Having foresight, trying to see, being future thinking, right? Being forward thinking, being open to what's coming, and then how do we navigate that? And then, of course, being a systems thinker, navigating complex environments, which I try to do, right, and take those lessons forward as I engage here. Other things I can get into, when it comes to part of the work in the academy that I feel needs to be done and that I try to do is deconstructing these disciplinary paradigms, particularly to forward racial equity. And I can get into why I center race as a thing. I am happy to explain that to anybody who wants to know. But in thinking about deconstructing these paradigms to forward racial equity by doing these things, right? And this is work that comes out of AAC&U and also Dr. D. Fink, right? So this is me just kind of in my head putting things together that the diversity work and equity work that AAC&U has done. And so how I see myself trying to deconstruct these paradigms and build something new, something different, and much more welcoming. Okay, so within GVSU, right, these kind of 6 things that I lean into, and outside, some of this stuff was already there before I got here, right? So I was already doing some of this stuff, right? Centering history and being introspective. You're gonna always hear me talk about, well, if we wanna understand what's going on now, what was going on then? And if we wanna know what we need to do for the future, it's lessons in the past that we can tap into, right? So I'm big on making those connections, that through line. Of course, building classroom community, assessing race and racism talk competencies, I think is really important to be comfortable talking about. I think one of the most central organizing principles of US history is around racism and this construct of race, which is a global construct, but has a particular resonance here within this nation. The paradigm deconstructing, the lifelong learning, of course, and then coalition building and fellowship. I'm big on trying to bring people together, and let's bring folks together. Let's break bread. There's something about breaking bread with people and having a conversation that moves work, that advances work, that opens folks up. And so I believe in that. And in the interest of that kind of coalition building and fellowshipping, I want to read about my belief that this will bring about the beloved community, right? So the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is the type of spirit. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opponents into friends. It is this type of understanding, goodwill, that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the hearts of people. And so in the end, there's been great recognition. You stated, right, Trista, for me, the things that the work that has been recognized and honored, and so I so appreciate that. But in the end, this is, for me, ultimately what it is all about. That is my family. As my husband, Joseph, my daughters, Ahlam and Amal. And getting back to thinking about liberation and the work that I do on a daily basis, it is all about those 2 little girls and what I think about the kind of world that I want them to be able to maneuver through, to navigate, to be able to be free, to be who they are, right? And so my daughter, my oldest, it's kind of hard to see, but she wrote this, she had to do this thing in English class, I think it was, and she had to write about somebody she admired, and she wrote it about me, and her teacher, she mailed this to me and said, I don't know if you saw this, but I want you to see this. And I hadn't seen it. You know, kids, they're like, whatever. Okay? And so it's like, yes, right? She sees mommy. She sees what mommy is doing. She sees that she can be a nuclear engineer. This is what this girl wants to do. This girl who is just zooming through everything. She is just, you know, she amazes me. And my youngest daughter as well, she has such a strong will and spirit. In the beginning, I had to be very careful because I didn't want to break that will, but I was like, girl, you hard-headed. So how do I balance this? Because I want her to have that. She needs to be fierce, right? So I had to check myself sometimes. But that little one, that one is dynamic, right? So in the end, that is who I am, how I come to be this person that you know, that you worked with, right? This is my story. And it does not end. This is the midpoint. This is it will continue on. And I am excited to continue to do more work at the institution, within the community, for my family, for my friends, for our world. So that went a little bit longer than I would have wanted, but I don't know, I just got moved in certain places. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, and we have some more offers for you as a thank you gift.
That's great.
And if you all have any questions, we still have plenty of time, so you feel open to answering questions.
Oh, sure. I'm happy to answer questions.
Who wants to go first? I have a question for you.
Yes.
I love you shared about studying abroad.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to study abroad, intern abroad, and work abroad, and it's something that I tell students that it's so transformative of an experience, and I think really helps you become a much more empathetic person as you move throughout the world and all of your experiences.
Yeah.
How did your family, your parents react to you studying abroad?
Yeah. So that's a very good question. There were times when, and I know Lisa Renee can appreciate this. So there are times when I would come home from University of Michigan, right? And I would be in conversation with my mother. And I guess I forgot whose house I was in. I don't know, but I still thought I was at, University of Michigan, right? And so she would be like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, mama, But because my world was just there was so much, right? And I was coming home with things like stuff that I was questioning, right? Because there were things that I had been taught to believe, and that's not really, I'm seeing that's not totally accurate, right? But what about this, And so we were grappling, right? There was a tension there. She would remind me, and I would shut my mouth, right, at that particular point. To go to Italy, right, when, Canada, because it was right over the bridge or the go take the tunnel, that was the most, international travel, right, we had done. And my mother could just see how I lit up about talking about this opportunity to be able to go to Italy. And so she was, Chas, if you want it, that's what you think you need, then I'm here to support you, right? So this is my dad was excited for the opportunity as well. But my mother is the one who took me to the airport. Now, I remember this is pre-9/11. So we get to the Detroit airport, and she's walking me right up to the gate. She's standing there as I'm going down the long corridor to take this international flight, right? With this big backpack on my back, beyond the big old suitcase that I had checked in. So she was scared, right? To be halfway around the world. This is before, cell phones were a thing that were really economical, right, for everybody. So that wasn't a thing, right? And so it was her just trusting in that she raised me right? That she raised me right. I'm not gonna go out there and, tarnish the Bailey name or the Wilson name, right? That I had my head on straight, right? All those kind of euphemisms, right? And so I was very fortunate that there wasn't a big struggle of me trying to explain why I thought that this was important, and then coming back and her being able to just see, it changed me, right? I didn't know Italian, and somehow I was able to fly to Rome, take a bus to the train station, take the train from Rome to Florence, get from Florence to 6 miles outside of Florence called Sesto Fiorentino. This was the villa that University of Michigan had in conjunction with Wake Forest University, and arrived there safe and sound. How I navigated that, not speaking any Italian, right? Not knowing anything except having a little map, right? I didn't have Siri and GPS, it was me looking at that map, trying to figure out how do I get here or there, trying to ask for biglietti, I need a ticket to where, and those things. And so, like you said, transformative, opening, again, not knowing what I could do until I had to. And that's a lesson that I take with me, so.
I was going to say, was there a mantra or words of affirmation that you constantly told yourself throughout your journey?
I can't really, Anna, I can't point to a particular affirmation or mantra. I just guess in me it was, how, it's that thing of when you first go someplace that you've never ever seen or experienced, and just the emotion of I'm seeing the hills of Tuscany that I've read about, right? I'm seeing, walking down the street and there's some kind of, Botticelli has done something with some statuary, and I'm taking it all in, right? And it's just, this is a moment. I think for myself, it was, you might not ever be able to get back here. So do as much, see as much as you can. And just the thing of knowing that if I could get here, right, in one piece, right, then I should be able to navigate this Italy thing, right? So I can't point to one thing, but it was just having that openness, and I guess kind of being a little bit in awe of myself at what I was able to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Curious, knock out your grandma, your mom, your teacher, books, teaching you your body. What are you still learning about love? What are your babies learning about love?
Mm-hmm.
And what, for the folks that you're surrounded with here at GP, what are we still learning about love?
Mm-hmm. What I am still learning about love is still underestimating its power. And so we've had, thanks to the two of you, had a little bit of conversation about love, right? And we're not talking about that, I love you, I mean deep love, like I'm showing up in this space because I love you, right? I am standing beside you, I'm doing this work, right? I'm carrying this thing because I love you. Doing this work. So the power in that. I am learning more and more about the way in which folks love this idea of this nation, right? Because we're still pushing to make it become its more perfect union, always, right? There is still that love of this idea. And there are things that can be done with it. And so I think, even though kind of intellectually, I get that, I don't think I really, really get that, right? Because that can be scary. Love is revolutionary, right? So that's one thing. What my girls are learning about love is, making sure they understand love should not hurt, right? Seeing me love myself and helping them to understand that they need to love their self for who they are, right? That having, again, being able to have had love and understand love and know that I love myself, and then that comes out in the ways that I interact with other people and what I receive back, right? So that is something. And then what I think GVSU needs to learn, right, about love is you cannot take it for granted, right? That there is work to be done on all sides. It's just not a frilly limp thing, right? You don't say, oh, we're a family. Are we really a family? How are you showing me that we family up in here, right? That there is action, right? That love is not idle, it's not wimpy. There is action behind that. And I think that that we as a community, right? Because we talk about the universe, but we are the institution, that we need to understand that. And so it takes work on all of our parts. And so it cannot be empty. And I feel like there can be a lot of spaces where that is empty, right? So, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I am going to invite Kristen up. She has a little announcement and share about an event and a raffle. And as you all are packing your things up for the day, if you could scan the QR code that's on the table to let us know that you were here, we would greatly appreciate that.
Well, thank you again to Chasity. Can we give another round of applause? I think we're nearing close to 60 installments of HerStory over the years, and it's always a great time to be together.